Today, Aptera concluded their launch event webinar, which someone decided it should be live, like streamed in real time, which personally I wouldn't have done just because it seemed like the connection was a bit spotty and they were kind of reading things off the teleprompter, which was a bit clunky. My own personal recommendation, if you're going to have these types of events, is to just do it edited. That way you can have multiple takes and you don't kind of stumble over your words. And if you want to have a live webinar for just Q&A in the future, that's fine. But trying to rope in an announcement, an unveil, a live stream, and a Q&A all into one, I think things get a little bit too jumbled. But overall, the purpose of this event was to get very specific on the actual first Aptera vehicle that will be put into production. Of course, that is still pending funding once they have enough money to buy the equipment and tooling that is required to start up production of the Aptera. And it should be mentioned that, like their vehicle being hyper efficient, they have also been extremely efficient with their spending. The reason that a lot of people are impressed with the fact that they have a Delta prototype and they're doing partnerships with CPC and they clearly have finalized the production intent design and all that is they've spent a fraction of the money that most other companies like Rivian or Lucid or Canoo have had to spend just to get to the Delta prototype stage. And there's several government loan programs that they're seeking because, relatively speaking, 50 million is really not that much compared to what other EV startups tend to need. So I'm hoping that they can secure funding through different loan programs that both the state and the federal governments are offering. And they had some cool new Easter eggs with this announcement. Like, there's gonna be this sub-trunk storage area in the Aptera, so they boosted the amount of cargo room in this final version with now 32 cubic feet of storage, which is amazing. There's cargo hooks and things to mount to on the inside. Of course, the hatch is a lot easier to lift up with this new updated design. And the first model they're making is gonna be all-wheel drive, which yes means 3 motors in total, with a 42 kilowatt hour battery pack, which they're estimating to get about 400 miles of range, assuming that 100 watt hour per mile range figure. And the launch edition is also going to have a maxed out solar package, which makes sense. Most people reserving the Aptera were getting full solar, and because it's about 700 watts, that translates to 40 miles of range per day if you're in a very sunny area. So incredible specs, but they also had to get a bit more realistic about it, with the 0 to 60 time getting a slight decrease in performance, which isn't the end of the world. I think most people buying these vehicles weren't buying them for the acceleration, they were buying them for the efficiency. But yeah, the all-wheel drive model now has a 0 to 60 time of about 4 seconds. Originally they thought it could get to 3.5, and the front-wheel drive model, which still has 2 motors, is now estimating a 0 to 60 time of about 6 seconds, which is still pretty quick. Keep in mind this launch edition Aptera still has 3 motors like a plaid Tesla does, and is faster than a dual motor Model Y or dual motor Model 3, which I've accelerated in those and they still get plenty fast in my view. So knowing that the Aptera is also going to be capable of those speeds for a much lower price is incredible, but there's one big problem, and this is pretty much what the entire Aptera community is talking about right now, which is arguably a deal breaker for a lot of people, and that's the charging situation. So there was definitely a lot of hope for the Aptera when they first said, you know, we want to adopt the NACS connector and we want to support Tesla's connector because we believe that is the best, and Aptera would love to access the supercharging network. And I would imagine Tesla wants Aptera to access the supercharging network, because then Tesla qualifies for way more government funding, because they can say, hey, our charging stations charge more than just one type of EV. And I'm sure a lot of Aptera fans were excited to be able to access the supercharging network with their car. But the big bomb drop from today about the launch edition Aptera is it will only support AC charging, which is more efficient, but inherently much slower than DC fast charging, which pretty much all mainstream EVs, at least EVs in this price point, typically have. That's how you're able to charge, you know, at least at a rate of like 30 to 40 or 50 kilowatts on lower end EVs, and then vehicles like Tesla's can charge at, you know, 170 to 250 kilowatts. Now, it's true that the Aptera uses a fraction of the power per mile, so that's the cool thing about AC charging the Aptera. Like, if you just plug it into a 110 outlet, literally the same outlet you probably charge your phone on, that gives the Aptera 13 miles of range per hour, which is pretty good considering that's an entire vehicle with 32 cubic feet of storage, and it can seat 2 people and move at high speed. They also mentioned at this event that the top speed is actually a little over 100 miles per hour, so if you're hoping to scream at 110 or 120, I guess I'm sorry, this won't do that. But not having DC fast charging absolutely makes road road tripping in the Aptera a lot more complicated, because best case scenario, you can find a level 2 charger, like a charge point that offers up to 6 or 7 kilowatts, which with this launch edition, they're saying that's what it'll max out at, is the 240 volt, 6.6 kilowatt onboard charger, which means 57 miles of range added back per hour. So a little bit under a mile a minute, which is not great for, you know, we just need to stop and use the restroom, maybe grab some food and then come back out to the car. If you've only added, you know, 10 or 20 miles after 10 or 15 minutes, that's going to make road tripping a lot harder. Now, of course, this is still a 400 mile range EV, which beats out pretty much any other EV that even comes remotely close to the price point of the Aptera, but still, a lot of people are road tripping much more than 400 miles. And sure, it's not necessarily something we do on a daily basis, but I think a lot of people were most interested in the Aptera, partly because they're boasting about having 400, 600, or 1,000 miles of range, and when people are thinking of range that far in a vehicle, they're planning road trips, and they know that there's elevation differences, and the launch edition still sounds like it's going to have a resistive heater, not a heat pump, so it's probably unrealistic to assume we'll actually get those estimated range numbers at highway speed. So not having DC fast charging, yeah, I'm sorry, that is definitely a deal breaker for a lot of people out there, which upsets me because I'm such a big fan of the Aptera. I want them to succeed more than anybody else, but it sounds like from the way they answered it at the webinar and their discussions with Sandy Monroe is that they're just trying to go very, very simple, very profitable with their first launch edition vehicle so that they can get enough money to continue ramping up production. And they have clarified several times that they want to add DC fast charging in the future. It's not like some inherent design flaw, like it's impossible to have it, but they did say during this webinar that having DC fast charging complicates the cooling systems and wiring infrastructure that you have to build into this vehicle, and they're just trying to prioritize affordability and keeping the vehicle cheap and simple to build. And based on the community's response from what I've seen in the comment sections and in the Discord community, where there's both Aptera investors, potential customers, and there's even some Aptera employees in the Aptera Owners Club Discord, there's a lot of people that are arguing, you know, it's a 2-seat vehicle and it has 3 wheels. I was going to use this for mostly commuting anyway. I wasn't really planning on road tripping much more than the 400 mile range number that they gave us. So while my first reaction when I saw them say no DC fast charging until a later date, I was like, ooh, yikes, like that's a huge mistake. Please do not release this vehicle without DC fast charging. But frankly, based on the community's response, it seems like there's a lot of people out there that think, yeah, I can get by with 400 miles. And of course, a lot of people are looking at the Aptera as not their primary vehicle. It is a secondary vehicle meant to drive me to work and back, and maybe drive a little bit more than that when I just need something efficient. I don't need to fit my whole family in the car, what have you. I don't need to pick up a bunch of people from the airport. So that limits the potential market, in my opinion, by a lot to not have at least a 50 kilowatt charger, but they're not telling us exactly how fast this eventual DC fast charging will be. They're just saying that we hope to eventually have an option in the future that can put 100 miles of range back into the battery pack in 10 minutes, which, assuming a 100 watt hours per mile, that's like roughly a 50 kilowatt charger, which is what Aptera said that they were going to have originally. Now they're saying they're not going to have it on the launch edition. Because it's a solar powered EV and most people seem to be opting for the full solar package, I guess that it does in a way kind of support that mindset of being a never charge EV, right? Like DC fast charging honestly should probably be the only charging this vehicle needs, right? Like if I could only pick between AC charging and DC charging, I would pick the DC charging, because with 40 miles of range being added back per day, I don't need to plug this into a 110 outlet. I don't need to plug it into a charge point. For the daily commute, 40 miles per day, plus, you know, there's certain days of the week where maybe you're driving less than 40 miles, so you get some of that surplus for later on. I kind of feel like, why do we need AC charging in the first place? For my use case, the Aptera would probably just kind of sit in the driveway charging itself. I don't need to worry about the NAX connector unless, of course, I'm on a road trip and driving a lot more than 400 miles in a day, which I have on occasion. So I'm hopeful that there's enough people willing to switch over the reservation to the launch edition. It only comes with Luna right now, but they have made it very easy on the website to switch your configuration to the launch edition model to make sure that you get one of the first models. And it seems like Aptera staff in the Discord are saying, hey, if DC fast charging is important to you, we got got no problem with you waiting. Like, it's definitely coming in a future update. I just think it's kind of important right now for the Aptera community to kind of respectfully and in a supportive way state that this is a very important feature, and we're kind of nervous that you're willing to take it out on the launch edition model. And please do not like push off development of that feature, because this absolutely is very, very crucial for a lot of us. And I'm not saying like Aptera is a fraud or Aptera needs to die or anything. Like, I still wish them the best, and I'm happy to see that there's lots of potential customers out there that are switching over their orders and are saying, yeah, I can get by with just AC charging, and 400 miles of range is enough for me. So I'm happy for those people out there, but I hope the biggest takeaway they have from this launch edition is that it's a very important feature for a lot of their customers. Maybe not 100%, but a very decent chunk, and I'm not canceling my reservation or anything like that. I'm still hopeful, and again, like before, they said that the 1,000 mile range variant that I'm interested in is going to be built last, so I'm hoping that by the time the 600 and 1,000 mile range Aptera are ready, DC fast charging can be a standard thing. And again, it doesn't need to be 200 kilowatts like other EVs do. You can get by with 50 or 75 kilowatts, and that will still roughly translate to, you know, 500, 600, 800 miles per hour, which is plenty fast for most people road tripping, I think. And I really hope that they can get the funding they need from big investors or from government loans. And I'm glad they're working with Sandy Monroe, because he's awesome and I trust him. So yeah, kind of big yikes in my opinion from the no DC fast charging thing, but it seems like there's a decent number of people that are comfortable with that not being in the launch edition, and Aptera is already referencing that there will be a way to upgrade the launch edition to have DC fast charging in the future. How complicated that's going to be, how much it's going to cost, I don't really know, but they've earned my respect by being a company that really, basically to a fault, is all in favor of we need to be efficient, and we're trying to make the most efficient vehicles possible on the road, and AC charging at low speed is definitely more efficient than DC charging at fast speed. So hats off to them for having the guts to pull this off, and likely prove how many people are like, yeah, I don't need a fourth wheel, I don't need a second row, and I don't need DC fast charging. Like, I'm impressed that there's that many people comfortable to switch over the reservations to the launch edition to make sure they're first in line. But yeah, I hope it's not too complicated to add in the future, because it absolutely will be a very crucial feature for many of us. But how do you guys feel? Like, is DC fast charging a must for your Aptera order, or do you think as a commuter vehicle it doesn't really need it? Feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments below, and thank you to everyone on Patreon supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.